Welcome to the Truman Charities podcast, a community of caring. I am Jamie Truman, your host. I'm one of the co-founders of Truman Charities. Our organization has raised over $1 million for several different charities as we share our message of helping others and paying it forward. We plan to continue to educate our audience on the culture of giving. On this podcast, I will interview fellow charity founders, volunteers, sponsors, and other people in the community who will share their stories. You will hear and be inspired by their selflessness and passion for helping others. Welcome to another episode of A Community of Caring. My guest today is Laurie Strongin, and she is a wife, a mother who has been through the unthinkable, and through that tragedy has created this incredible foundation called Hope for Henry. And that is what we're here to talk about today. So Laurie, how are you?
I'm doing great. Thank you. How are you?
Good. I know how busy you are. Honestly, if you look at your website, and you go under the news, you guys are everywhere. So I was surprised and it was a great surprise that you were able to take the time to talk with us.
It's absolutely my pleasure.
So, if you don't mind, people that don't know you and don't know your story, can you tell us your story and about Henry?
Absolutely. So back in 1995, I went in to give birth to my first child and, had no idea what to expect, just like any new mom, except for that I had no idea how to, put on a little undershirt or change a diaper. I'd never done any of that before. And, I was so excited. And I went in to the hospital with a scheduled C-section because he was breech. And within moments of his birth, the doctors picked up heart defect and swooped him away. And, that felt devastating at the time because you have this fantasy of just sitting in your hospital room and meeting your child and looking them in the eyes for the first time. And things just quickly started to unravel. And several hours later, a stranger walked into my hospital room and introduced himself. He was the head of cardiology from Children's Hospital. And he explained that Henry was going to have open heart surgery. And they were calling in the head of genetics because Henry was also a small baby and had been breech, and they just were concerned maybe something more was going on. And 2 weeks later, he was diagnosed with a rare fatal disease that my husband and I had never heard of, but were unknowingly carriers of. And from that moment on, our life took a 90-degree turn. And, we faced the most devastating challenges that I think a parent could imagine, and also learn to live the most meaningful life in a way that we didn't even know was possible. During the first 4.5 years of Henry's life, he was able to play sports and go to preschool and do everything every other kid could do. He had no idea he was sick, but his bone marrow wasn't functioning properly. And that's what his disease ultimately led to, which was bone marrow failure. The disease was called Fanconi anemia. Again, there's 1,000 kids in the world with it. So it's nothing probably that almost anyone has ever heard of. In fact, when I meet physicians, they'll say to me, I think we heard about that for 15 minutes in medical school, but I've never seen anyone with it. It's really, really rare. Yeah. And when Henry was 4.5, his bone marrow failed, and we went off to University of Minnesota Children's, where he had a transplant. And he lived for 2.5 years with the most incredible spark and spunk and courage, but with a lot of challenges related to the fact that he did not have a suitable bone marrow donor. We were very fortunate to have a very generous person on the bone marrow registry offer to donate to try and save his life, but the match was not close enough for him. Mm-hmm. And so he suffered from graft versus host, which is just a complication from having a donor that's just not quite enough, a close enough match. And Henry died when he was 7, which was devastating, of course, to me and my husband and to Henry's brothers, Jack and Joe. and to everyone who knew and loved Henry, which at that point were many, many thousands of people who found him to be an incredibly inspiring human being. But we found, during the time that Henry was mostly living in the hospital, which was the better part of those 2.5 years, that we're lucky here in the US, and it was easy to access great medical care. But none of the hospitals, even some of the very best hospitals in the country, had any sustained services that really recognize that kids who are sick are kids. They're totally normal kids who happen to be fighting something serious. Right. And if you turn them into patients, they're probably going to have a much harder time doing all the really difficult stuff they're going to have to do. And at the time, we had to figure out for ourselves how to keep Henry being Henry a kid before he was turned into Henry a patient.
With your experience in the hospitals, is that what made you want to create this Hope for Henry Foundation, just your personal experience with that?
Absolutely. So, a very clear example of one of the things that my husband and I did was that this is so long ago that all of this stuff will sound sort of prehistoric to everyone, but we were probably one of the very first people to buy a portable DVD player. Like, we had to buy it direct from Sony. It wasn't available in the stores yet. And it was like $1,000, which to us as a young couple with a really ill child was an absolute fortune. But what happened was Henry and his brother Jack would be sitting there in the hematology oncology clinic watching Pokemon and Batman movies and laughing. So even though Henry had his N95 mask on, which at the time no one else knew what that was, but that's how he had to live because he was immune compromised. But they would be in the clinic laughing and having fun. And all the other kids were just like so bored and so sad. And their parents were sad and depressed because there was nothing to do. And it felt in those moments when you're waiting to get a blood transfusion and you're sitting there for 6 hours in a clinic, like time was moving backwards. And, you'd go in thinking maybe you're only there for half an hour or an hour to get a blood count. And then all of a sudden you're waiting for your blood product and you're waiting and now it's nighttime. And our kids were having fun and like they weren't depressed. And when we could see how, the impact that made, not just on our kids, but then suddenly some of the other kids in the clinic would start tiptoeing over and looking over Henry and Jack's shoulder and watching the movies too. And they would cheer up. And it became so evident that medical care alone is critical, but it's insufficient. That it takes way more than medicine to help these kids heal. Mm-hmm. And so that's what we were able to provide to Henry and Jack. We celebrated over-the-top birthdays in the hospital and dressed up for Halloween and trick-or-treated, even if it was just in Henry's little hospital room. We celebrated every holiday. We got him, first run movies when they were out in the theater so he could talk to his friends when they were coming back from the movie theater and Henry had watched from his hospital room. I almost called it a hotel room because we tried to make it feel that way, And those things make a big difference. And Hope for Henry was created to bring that kind of wonder and magic into the hospital rooms of tens of thousands of other kids and around the country.
Now, if I can remember correctly, you do have a background in the nonprofit world, correct?
Yes, I do.
Was that helpful when you were creating your foundation?
Yeah. So I talk to people a lot who come to me for advice, like, how do you start a nonprofit? And I'll say, like, my path to becoming the CEO to Hope for Henry looks really linear, but it was so jagged. I started off when I graduated from the University of Michigan working in professional sports events. So in the cycling world, because I liked riding bikes. And then I moved into public relations and communications. And then I felt like I wanted to focus on just one issue area. And I moved into nonprofit management in the community development and housing world. And ultimately then went to work for a foundation and then wrote a book about my life experience. And so ultimately, when we established Hope for Henry and it was big enough to have a paid CEO, I had experience with big events and marketing of public relations and nonprofit management and grants management. But believe me, when I was like, running all over Aspen, Colorado, trying to get 1,100 cyclists and their management crews checked into hotels, I had no idea that would help me plan a gala, 35 years later.
Right.
It just did.
So tell us a little bit about Hope for Henry. What was the thought process behind it? I know you guys have some innovative ideas that you brought to the table that are really scientifically proven to help children in these type of situations.
So what's carried Hope for Henry through the last 19, almost 20 years is our mission to reinvent how hospitals care for kids. And we started off doing very simple things that were helpful to our family. So providing newly diagnosed kids and families with portable DVD players. So when they were sitting in clinics or waiting in the pre-op or coming into recovery rooms or back in their transplant rooms, they could stay occupied and entertained and distracted. And then we started having birthday parties in the hospitals for kids around the country. And then Harry Potter book parties and Halloween parties, and brought superheroes in and all the things that we had done for Henry and for his brothers. But at some point, we kind of came together and said, it is amazing to see all these kids smiling and laughing. And clearly there are therapeutic benefits to that. But there are other organizations around the country that are doing things like that. They might not be doing it as over the top as Hope for Henry is, but they are, they're superhero window washers, or they're people coming in around the holidays and giving gifts to kids. So what could we do that could actually really impact kids' medical outcomes? And I thought back to something that we had done for Henry when we left our home in Washington, D.C. and took him off the soccer field where they had just won like the championship game. And, he said goodbye to his girlfriend and all of his best friends. And we got to Minnesota where, his life, it felt like we exchanged his Technicolor life for this very stark black and white life in an 8x10 hospital room where he was going to live for 3 months, separated from his best friend and younger brother, Jack, who was just 1 year younger than he was. And that was an incredibly difficult transition for Henry because he had never been sick. And he had never had to swallow a pill or take yucky tasting medicine or have chemotherapy. I mean, he had no experience as Henry, a sick kid. And so I looked around his room and I was like, oh my God, Henry, there's a magic closet in the corner. And I bet you if they let you take blood from your arm, there's going to be a Batman figure in that magic closet, because Henry was like the biggest Batman fan in the world. And he was like, oh, well, okay, I'll do that. And he stuck his arm out, like, bring it on, And then I said later on that day, I bet you if you take that medicine, there's going to be another Batman action figure in that magic closet. And over those 2.5 years, we had people, initially friends and family, and then people who just knew people who knew us, sending us Batman figures. And then when we got everyone that was ever on the market, Pokemon figures to stock the magic closet. And that became a way of life. And what we were doing without necessarily being conscious of it was using behavioral economics to help Henry adhere to his medical plan, right? We were incentivizing him by rewarding him for doing these really tough things. And so about 5 years ago, I said to someone on my team who's a child life specialist, like, how do we get that magic closet in every hospital room around the country? Mm-hmm. And we created an incentive program called Hope for Henry's Super Path to Super Duper Better. And that was like Henry's language for getting out of the hospital. Like, where am I on that super path to super duper better? And we started paying kids in Hope for Henry bucks to do whatever it was that was hard for them. So some kids wanted 100 Hope for Henry bucks for doing their chemo that day. Others wanted 50 bucks for getting a needle stick, or 20 bucks for swallowing a yucky medicine, or 10 Hope for Henry bucks every time they had to get their vital signs taken, because it's annoying to come in and be bothered 6 times a day. And they would accrue their money and save for anything on their wish list. And we would buy it for them or arrange it for them. So, the first child on this plan wanted to go to the One Direction show and meet Harry Styles. And we were like, ooh, we weren't thinking that was going to happen, but we'll figure it out. And sure enough, 6 months later, she walked Harry Styles out on a stage and like with her sisters and like had literally, she said like the best day of her life. And so we were like, okay, well, this is working, and other kids picked Lego sets, and a little girl named Tara earned 1 Hope for Henry buck for every hard thing she needed to do. And at the end of the week, she would swap all of her bucks for like bunnies, a little stuffed bunny. And she called those bunny bucks in exchange for stuffed bunnies. And when her treatment was over, she left the hospital with her arms filled with stuffed bunnies. And she was like done with cancer, And I mean, so every single child was accruing bucks and saving for different things. One little boy was so cute. He got like an RG3 fat head for his wall, like covering it with a big, Washington football team, player. Right. And he got a bottle of nail polish for his mom because she was by his bedside every day, and a Philadelphia Eagles water bottle for his brother. So like the generosity that kids demonstrate is extraordinary. And people were saying to us, aren't you afraid kids are going to game the system? Like everyone's going to want a laptop. And I was like, you don't understand kids. Like they're not gaming the system. They just want to feel better, and they want to do what they have to do. And they're mostly collectors of little things. So far more kids were like Henry and collecting Batman figures, or like Tara and collecting little stuffed bunnies, than they were, looking for computers or airplane tickets.
Well, if you look on your website, you have, and I would love for everybody to go on there and look at some of your stories from some of the children that have been touched from Hope by Henry. Yeah. And one of them that I was reading was Kaylee, and you guys had a Minnie Mouse little birthday party for her because she was out of town and she was spending her 4th birthday in this new town in a hospital. She doesn't know anybody. And I think those moments just have to be so special for you to see.
Yeah. And they don't just change that day. They make kids feel like seen and less isolated and not forgotten. When you're in a hospital for so long, it feels like the whole world's going by without you. And that exacerbates how scared and lonely you feel. So when there's somebody out there that says, actually, I know you're there, and I'm thinking about you, and you're special, and you're so special that we're going to do for you exactly what we're doing for our own kids. Like, we're not just giving you something left over on a shelf somewhere. We're not going to the dollar store and giving you something. We're giving you exactly what we would give to our own child. And that is a feeling like there's a message in there that says, like, we know you're going to be around for a long time and you matter. And that gives kids hope and optimism about how things are going to go for them. And, the success of all of these programs led us right as the pandemic hit to develop a new program called Super Rewards for Super Kids. And that rewards kids for undergoing 15 of the most common but scary medical procedures. So everything from getting a vaccination, going through an MRI, getting their port accessed, getting a lumbar puncture. So things that like every kid anywhere has to do. Like we all are getting, whether it's COVID vaccinations or flu vaccinations, but needle phobia is a real thing. And incentivizing kids to, like, by explaining exactly what's going to happen step by step, and then rewarding them with a certificate when they're done and with a prize that they get to pick, makes it a whole lot easier to do. If you think about walking into an MRI suite and seeing this towering medical equipment, like that just is scary and no one wants to do that. But if you say, here's exactly what's going to happen, and with each step, you can put an I did it sticker on your game board because like you checked in at the front desk, I did it. You went to your treatment room, I did it. You changed into your gown, I did it. Like that is a sense of engagement in your care and accomplishment and achievement. And then at the end of your MRI, you can go get pick an Instax camera or a Lego set or a journal and gel pens or Kendra Scott jewelry or a Lids baseball cap. And guess what? You have a positive association with the doctor or with the hospital, and you're going to come back and do it again someday with a smile on your face, probably.
Yeah, there was a segment that you had on your website. I believe it was ABC 7, and they were talking to one of the doctors, one of the local hospitals, and she was saying the percentage of children that they have to sedate in MRIs had decreased significantly based on Hope for Henry.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The average percentage of kids who were scheduled to be sedated. So these are kids who were assessed and the medical doctors said there's pretty much no way that this child can go through an MRI without being sedated. Mm-hmm. And they were presented with our program, and 52% of those children were able to go through an MRI without sedation. If you think about it, it is so powerful, Jamie, because those kids, I mean, the risk to their safety is minimized because they're not going through anesthesia.
Right.
The fear that their parent experiences when they have to hand their child over to an anesthesiologist is gone if they don't have to be anesthetized. The procedure takes a quarter of the time if they don't need to be anesthetized. And it also saves the family or the insurance company or the hospital or some combination of that an average of $3,816.
Wow.
That's a lot of money, particularly for a family that's in the middle of a medical crisis.
Right.
So the benefits of this program are tremendous for the children, for their families, for the institutions that are using it, and for the health insurance companies that are paying a portion of it. So win-win-win.
Yeah, I know, everybody. So
yeah.
Tell me, what hospital did you start out and where are you guys now with the hospitals that have Hope for Henry?
So Hope for Henry is based here in Washington, D.C., which is our hometown. It's actually where I was born. It's where my husband is from. All of our kids were born here. And Henry was a patient at MedStar Georgetown. So that is where we founded Hope for Henry on what would have been Henry's 8th birthday on October 25th of 2003. And we are now at 19 hospitals around the country. And by the end of this year, we will be at 25 hospitals. And in fact, I think by the end of this month, we'll probably be at 23 of those 25 hospitals. We are getting calls, not surprisingly, based on all the conversation that we've already had, like every week from new hospitals. But I can tell you some of the hospitals that we're at right now. So MedStar Georgetown, Inova Children's, Cleveland Clinic, Mercy Children's in Kansas City, Children's Healthcare of Atlanta, the biggest children's hospital in Los Angeles, Children's Hospital of Orange County, Seattle Cancer Care Alliance, NYU Langone, Children's Hospital at Montefiore in the Bronx. I mean, Children's Hospital of Philadelphia, we're all over the place. And this past week, we had a really exciting conversation with Children's National, and the intention is to go back to that hospital and reintroduce Hope for Henry in the coming months. So, I mean, we plan to be at 100 hospitals in the next few years, and I don't doubt that will happen.
Oh, I don't doubt it either.
Yeah.
And, you know, on your website, which is great, if people scroll down, you have a ticker of how many kids you have served so far. And it was, I believe it was like 68,000 at this.
Well, it turns out it's over 70,000. We just had a meeting yesterday. I'm like, we have to update that ticker. It is. It's over 70,000. Mm-hmm.
That must make you feel just so happy and excited about how this is helping so many kids, you know, around the US now. So for people that are listening, how can they help?
So there are so many ways to help Hope for Henry. So I would say that I'll start with the simplest way. For people who just would like to just sort of put their toe in the water. So we have, with our rewards program, we have an Amazon wish list that lists all of the most popular rewards that kids are picking to receive following their MRI or their port access or their lumbar puncture. And people can just go onto our wish list and pick one of those rewards or any number of them, and they will be shipped directly to Hope for Henry, and we share them with all of our hospital partners around the country. And those rewards will go from like a click of a button truly to a Hope for Henry Super Rewards cart and into the hands of a child who has just endured a very scary and tough medical procedure with incredible courage. So that is like the fastest, easiest way to get involved. And if you go to our website, you can click a button and you will get to that Amazon wish list and you can participate that way. We also have a virtual 5K that is during the week of Mother's Day. And we will have that information up on our website. You can, again, just click and you can run as a virtual runner, or you could start a team with all of your friends. And again, a really simple and fun, non-competitive way to participate. And the price of one race entry will provide 3 rewards for a child participating in one of our programs. So it's just such a easy, concrete way to support Hope for Henry. Another easy way is to go on our website and just make a donation of any amount. The least expensive rewards are $10, and any multiple thereof is going to help a child adhere to their medical plan so that they can get out of the hospital and get back to the life that they were leading before their diagnosis. And that's all of those things are so important. If you work for a company that is philanthropic, we have ways for corporate entities to get involved, or for employees to volunteer together for Hope for Henry. And I'm happy to talk with you about that. And anyone can just email me at Laurie, Laurie, at hopeforhenry.org, and we can talk about ways that you could get involved. Of course, if anyone works for a company that produces really cool stuff for kids and you want to add to the selection of rewards that we offer kids, we'd love to talk to you about that.
We will have everything in the show notes for everyone. So don't worry about that at all. We will have your social media handles, website, your email. And so, Laurie, how do you see Hope for Henry in, 5 years? What would be your goal?
So in 5 years, our intention is to be at 100 hospitals at least and serving 100,000 children. So that's the goal.
That'll happen.
And we have yet to miss a goal. So that's what we will be doing.
Well, I just looked at your ticker and it went from 60 something to 70,000. So I think that your 5-year goal will be like a 1-year goal.
I hope so. I mean, I can tell you, Jamie, that I am seeing every day that the difference that we were able to make in Henry's life is happening for literally thousands of kids around this country. And I'm so enormously proud of it. And I am, as hard as it was to leave my career in community development and housing, which I really believe so strongly in, the impact that I am seeing in my day-to-day work is so powerful. And I would say to anyone, when you think about investing your time or your resources, your money in a nonprofit, Hope for Henry is a great investment. Mm-hmm. It's a great investment. It's an immediate impact on the most vulnerable children in this country.
Is there anything that we haven't covered that you think is important for people to know?
I mean, I think the one thing that really struck me when my son was diagnosed, and I think it's something that people don't really understand, is that, kids who have cancer or serious blood disease or organ failure, these kids are not sick just for a few days or a few weeks. The average length of treatment for a kid with cancer is 1,072 days. I mean, it's almost 3 years. And when you think about a child diagnosed at age 4, that's half again their life. Yeah. It's such a long time to be really sick and so much time to spend in a hospital. And so I think that's something, it just didn't occur to me. I mean, even when I was in college at University of Michigan, I volunteered at Mott Children's Hospital, having no personal experience with illness. And even having spent time as a volunteer, I don't think I really understood, because I was only there for 6 months as a volunteer, just how much time and how disruptive to these children's lives their illnesses can be. Mm-hmm. And so I just think, when people think about how they want to give back and who they want to give back to, it's such an important beneficiary of your time and your love and your support, because ultimately we want these children to leave the hospital healthy and whole so that they can become productive members of our community and live a long life. But they need a lot of support to get there. And Hope for Henry is there with them from diagnosis to when they're done with their treatment. And it's a long time.
Well, Laurie, thank you so much. I've learned so much about, kids and what's happening when they're in the hospitals with chronic illnesses and all of these fantastic things that you're doing to help. And I just want to thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us. So thank you again, Laurie.
Absolutely my pleasure.
Good.
Come back and volunteer.
Yes. I already have things in my head working of like how we're going to help you guys, because I was so moved talking to you and reading about you. And you can't hear your story and look at the stories on your website. And of course, all of the news clips that you guys have been on and not want to do something and not be moved. Like you really are doing so much for the community. And I absolutely love it. So thank you again so much. And I want to thank you to the listeners for tuning in to another episode of A Community of Caring. Thanks again. If you would like to learn more about our organization, please follow us on Facebook at Truman Charities or Instagram at Jamie_Truman Charities, or check out our website, trumancharities.com. I hope you enjoyed listening and hearing stories of selflessness and caring. Thank you so much, and I will see you next time.